Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. This week, the Smooth Brain crew decided to play some of their own favorite personal decks, so let's see who's able to come out on top. First up is Matt on Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep. He wants to cast big ol' sea monsters to trigger Kiora in order to cast big ol' spells. His opening hand has a Misty Rainforest, a Mystic Remora, a Thought Vessel, an Oko Thief of Crowns, a Birds of Paradise, an Erixmethes, the Slumbering Isle, and Tromokratus. Next up is Ethan, playing Araumi of the Dead Tide. This reanimator deck hopes to fill its graveyard early to pay Araumi's cost to make 3 copies of huge haymakers. He starts the game with an island, 2 swamps, an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, a Careful Study, a Dread Return, and a Plague Crafter. Our third player today is Chandler, who brought back Adeline, Resplendent Cathar. Chandler hopes to kill his opponents quickly with this mono-white aggro deck, while also using the 1/1s created to get other kinds of value. His starting hand is a Plains, a Cave of the Frost Dragon, a Strip Mine, an Archaeomancer's Map, a Sword of Feast and Famine, a Stoneforge Mystic, and a Mentor of the Meek. Last up today is Shelby on Marchesa, the Black Rose. Shelby wants to put 1/1 counters on his creatures and sacrifice them in order to abuse their enter the battlefield or death triggers. He keeps a hand with 2 mountains, an underground river, an underground sea, a bloodstained mire, a lightning greaves, and a pitiless plunderer. We're about to hop right into that video, but before that, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our new content. Huge shout out to our patrons. We really appreciate the support, and if you want to support us too, our link to our Patreon is in the description, and we also have links to our deck lists, our social media, our podcast channel, and our public Discord server. Our channel is partnered with Dragon Shield, so if you're looking to pick up any new sleeves or Magic-related products, check out our affiliate link, also down in the description. And we're partnered with Inked Gaming, so if you want to make any custom playmats, use our affiliate link, also in the description. Now, on to the gameplay.
Looks like Shelby wins the die roll, and he starts off with a Bloodstained Mire, and he'll fetch for a tapped Steam Vents. While he's searching, he passes the turn to Matt, who plays Misty Rainforest, and he'll crack it for a Tropical Island. Then Matt casts Birds of Paradise, and he'll pass the turn to Ethan. Ethan plays an island, and he'll cast Careful Study to draw 2 and discard 2. Discards are both lands, so he passes to Chandler, who will play Cave of the Frost Dragon, and then he'll pass to Shelby, who plays a command tower. Then he taps for 2 and casts Talisman of Indulgence, then passes to Matt, who thankfully finds a second land drop in an island, and he'll tap for 2 and cast Thought Vessel. Then he'll tap his bird for a Mystic Remora. Then he passes the turn to Ethan, who starts off with an Urborg. Then he'll tap for 2 and cast Milliken, then pass to Chandler, who plays a Plains, and then he'll cast Stoneforge Mystic. With its ETB trigger, he finds Cauldra Complete to his hand. He'll then pass to Shelby, who starts off with a Mountain. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Marchesa. The turn is then passed to Matt, and he has a Cumulative Upkeep trigger, which he does pay for. Then he'll play another island, then tap for 4 and cast Erixmethes. The turn is then passed to Ethan, and he'll immediately slam Plague Crafter. He mills an island off Milliken, and everybody sacks a creature. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he'll play a Plains, slam Adeline, and then pass to Shelby, who starts off with an Underground Sea. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Solemn Simulacrum. He finds an island to the battlefield tapped, and then passes to Matt, who just lets his fish die on upkeep. Then he'll play a basic forest as land for turn, and I swear this guy always keeps 1 land hands and is never punished. Matt will then tap for 5 and cast Kiora. Then he passes to Ethan, who starts off by casting Perpetual Timepiece, and Milliken mills a swamp. Then Ethan will cast his commander, Araumi. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he starts off with a Strip Mine, and Ethan really wants him to hit Erixmethes with that. Chandler says he's not a villain though, and will tap for 3 and cast Mentor of the Meek. After this, he'll move to combat and swing Adeline at Ethan. Attack trigger, and a 1/1 is sent at everybody, and Chandler pays 1 to Mentor of the Meek to draw a card. All the 1/1s are blocked, and Adeline isn't, so Ethan will take 5 commander. Then the turn is passed to Shelby, who will play an Underground River as land for turn. Then he'll tap for 6 and recast Marchesa. He'll then move to combat and swing Solemn Simulacrum at Chandler. It'll get a Dethrone counter, and Chandler will just bounce with Adeline. And then the turn is passed to Matt, who starts off with another island. Then he'll tap for 3 and cast Nadir Kraken, and he has a Kiora trigger. Unfortunately, it is a whiff, so then Matt will cast Oko Thief of Crowns, and Araumi is selected as the elk target. Matt will then move to combat, hit Shelby for 4 commander, and then pass the turn to Ethan, who stops on instep and activates his Timepiece, and he'll mill Lightning Greaves and Buried Alive. Then he'll move to his turn and float a mana with Milliken, milling Victimize, and then he'll activate his Timepiece again, and he just mills more mana. He'll then cast Circuit Vendor, gaining 2 life when it ETBs. Then the turn is passed to Chandler, who will play a Plains, cast Sword of Feast and Famine, and immediately equip it to Adeline, then move to combat. And he swings Adeline at Ethan again, saying, "This is for my Stoneforge Mystic." All the tokens are blocked by bigger creatures, and Ethan puts the Circuit Mender underneath Adeline and draws a card when it dies. Then the turn is passed. And Shelby starts off with a High Market as land for turn. Then he'll cast and equip Lightning Greaves to Marchesa, and then we see Dockside Extortionist hit the battlefield. And he'll make 4 treasures off this. He'll then move the Lightning Greaves over to his dockside, and then move to combat and swing everything at Chandler, and he has 3 dethrone triggers. Chandler puts his 4/6 Adeline in front of Shelby's 4/4 Marchesa, but before damage, Shelby will sacrifice his Solemn Simulacrum to High Market to draw a card, gain a life, and then it'll come back and he tutors a basic to his battlefield. But the basic happens on end step, so let's move back to damage. Chandler takes 2 and Marchesa dies. And then after combat, Shelby just moves to the end of his turn and Marchesa and Solemn Simulacrum come back. Then we move to Matt's turn, and he'll just immediately cast Tromokratis, which gets a massive Kiora trigger. And from the Kiora trigger comes Serpent of Yawning Depths, which is absolutely terrifying. Matt will then plus Oko Thief of Crowns to turn Sword of Feast and Famine into a 3/3 Elk. Matt will then move to combat and swing Nadir Kraken at Chandler, and Chandler can't block it, so he just takes 2. And then Matt passes the turn to Ethan. Ethan starts off by activating Milliken to mill a Mire Triton, and then he'll activate his Timepiece to mill Agent of Treachery in a swamp. Ethan will then cycle Ash Barrens for an island, which he plays as land for turn. Then he'll tap for 5 and cast Sir Conrad. The turn is then passed to Chandler, and he starts off with a Felidar Retreat. Then he'll play Arch of Orazka as land for turn, and he'll make a 2/2 cat when it ETBs. And he'll pay 1 to Mentor of the Meek to draw a card. Chandler will then move to combat and swing Adeline at Ethan and make 3 tokens when he does. Adeline is chumped by Ethan's Elk, and then all the tokens are blocked again. 4 creatures die, so Conrad triggers 4 times. Then the turn is passed to Shelby, who starts off with Gamble. He tutors a card to his hand, and then starts shuffling his hand. When Ethan tells him to stop, Shelby discards the top card, which is Pitiless Plunderer. Then he'll cast Ashnod's Altar. Then Lightning Greaves are moved back to Marchesa, and then Shelby casts a Nazgul. The ring will tempt him on ETB, and he makes Marchesa his ring bearer, and he forgets to put the counter on his Nazgul. Shelby will then move to combat, and he can't decide whether he wants to swing at Matt or Ethan, but Ethan has a Sir Conrad, so everything is turned sideways at him. And there's dethrone triggers. Ethan puts Sir Conrad in front of Dockside Extortionist, and then he'll take 7 damage. And Shelby decides instead of letting Dockside die to damage, he's going to sacrifice it to High Market and gain a life. And since this triggers Sir Conrad too, his life total will stay the same. Shelby will then move to end step, and Dockside Extortionist comes back, making him another 5 treasure tokens. And then the turn is passed to Matt. And Matt starts off by slamming Coma. Pretty decent sized Kiora trigger that finds Force of Vigor onto the stack. Its 2 targets are Felidar Retreat and Ashnod's Altar. Shelby decides to sack Solemn Simulacrum to the altar to draw a card and get a basic land to the battlefield tapped on end step when it comes back. After this, Matt will uptick Oko and Elk the Lightning Greaves. Then Ethan remembers there was a Sir Conrad trigger from the Solemn Simulacrum dying. Matt will then move to combat and bonk Chandler for 8 he can't block and Ethan 6 he can't block. Then the turn is passed to Ethan, and he'll start off by doing what he's done every other turn, activating his artifacts to mill 3 cards, and one was a creature, so Sir Conrad trigger. Oh yeah, and Matt gets a Coma's Coil. Then Ethan will dread return Agent of Treachery and steal Coma. And it does leave the graveyard, but unfortunately Sir Conrad's trigger is missed. Ethan will then cast a Felwar Stone, and then pass the turn to Chandler. Coma Coil. And then Chandler will play a Windbrisk Heights and hide away a card. He'll then cast Eldrazi Monument, giving all of his creatures +1/+1, flying, and indestructible. Combat is next, and Adeline goes at Oko. Then he'll swing his Mentor of the Meek and his Flying Cat at Ethan, and his Sword of Elk and Elk at Shelby. Adeline combat trigger, so Shelby will end up taking 6. Token going at Matt goes at Oko as well, just in case. And then Ethan will take 8. Chandler will then just pass the turn. Coma Coil. And Shelby starts off with an Ancient Tomb. He'll then move to combat, swing everything but Nazgul at Matt, and then Nazgul at Chandler, and he remembers the Nazgul counter. There are no blocks at the table, so damage will just go through. Shelby then sacrifices his Solemn Simulacrum to High Market to draw a card, then he casts the card he drew, which is an Ozolith, then he moves to end step, and Solemn Simulacrum comes back, and he gets to tutor a land to the battlefield. Then the turn is passed to Matt, and Ethan gets another Coma's Coil. Matt starts off with a Soul Ring. Then he'll cast Finale of Devastation, X is equal to 7. And with it, he finds Scourge of Fleets to the battlefield. He's got 4 islands, so all creatures with toughness 4 or less are bounced to their owner's hands. Ethan will respond by sacrificing his 3 Coma's Coils, 1 to give Coma indestructible, just in case, 1 to tap down Serpent of Yawning Depths, and 1 to tap down Kiora, and he gets 3 Conrad triggers from this. And Shelby's Ozolith will get 3 counters. Matt will then move to combat, and he swings Tromokratis at Ethan, but since Coma is a serpent and indestructible, Ethan will put it under the bus. Matt will also swing Kiora at Shelby, and his 3/3 Coma's Coil at Chandler, and they both can't block. The turn is then passed to Ethan, and he gets a Coma's Coil on upkeep. He'll play an island as land for turn, and then recast Milliken, Then he'll recast Sir Conrad, and then pass the turn. And unfortunately on Chandler's upkeep, Ethan gets a Coma's Coil, and he has to sacrifice Adeline to Eldrazi Monument. Miss Conrad trigger, and Chandler plays a Plains. He'll recast Mentor of the Meek next. He'll then cast a Skyclave Apparition, and he decides to exile Nadir Kraken. Ethan asks him why he didn't do Marchesa, but Chandler says he and Shelby ain't beefing right now, so they're chill. And Shelby seconds this. Chandler will also pay one to draw a card off his Mentor, and then he'll pass the turn to Shelby. He starts off by recasting his Nazgul, and he gets tempted again, and remembered to put the counter on it this time. He'll then recast and equip Lightning Greaves to Nazgul. Then he'll move to combat and move the 4 counters on Ozolith over to Marchesa, making her a 9/9. Shelby will then swing 2 with Nazgul at Ethan and 9 Commander at Matt, and they both don't block. The turn is then passed to Matt, and Ethan gets yet another Coma's Coil. Matt will then move to combat, and before he can declare attacks, Ethan will sacrifice 3 Coma's Coil to tap down Erixmithes, Scourge of Fleets, and the Yawning Depths Serpent. And there's 3 Conrad triggers, so this puts Matt down to 1. Matt is unfortunately now in a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation, so he'll just move to combat, swing Coma's Coil at Chandler, and the Tromocratus at Ethan. Now Ethan could block with his Coma, but he really doesn't want to because he has a plan for it next turn. So he and Chandler will just take the damage, 8 for Ethan and 3 for Chandler. So then the turn is just passed to Ethan, and he starts off by activating his Perpetual Timepiece to mill 2 cards. Then he'll cast Cloud of Fairies, untapping 2 lands. Ethan then sacrifices his Fairies, his Coma's Coil, and Coma to flashback Dread Return to get Plaguecrafter back to the battlefield. There's 4 Conrad triggers, and Matt dies. Then, the Plaguecrafter trigger will resolve, and everybody sacrifices a creature. This triggers Conrad 3 more times, which will kill Chandler. After this, Ethan will pay 2 and exile his Perpetual Timepiece to shuffle 7 creatures from his graveyard into his library, which triggers Conrad 7 times. And well, would you look at that? Shelby is at exactly 7, so this means he dies and Ethan's the winner. So there you have it. Ethan wins. Congratulations, man. Well everyone, there you have it. Ethan wins with Araumi. Or should I say Sir Conrad? Cause Jesus, Conrad is powerful. Luckily though, everybody got to have some good fun during this game, so let us know what you guys thought down in the comments below, and don't forget to check out all of our links. But that's enough for today guys, I hope you all have a smooth day.